Hey, welcome to Riverside episode 6. Today we're going to talk about celebrating Christmas in November. It's a surprisingly hot topic. We'll also be talking about how to get started in fly fishing without spending a ton of money. Christmas is right around the corner. What better time to start fly fishing than right now? And also, we're going to talk about Noah's Ark. And more specifically, how could a loving God send a flood which wipes out the entirety of humanity? It's a question that breaks a lot of people's faith, but it doesn't have to. So that's what we're talking about today. Tight lines, let's get started. Woo! Alright, so we will get started with celebrating Christmas in November. This is a surprisingly hot topic for whatever reason. People get really passionate about this topic, and I feel like what you're either on one side where you're celebrating Christmas gung-ho, you're doing all the Christmas stuff in November, or you're on the other side where you don't celebrate Christmas at all and you won't even think about Christmas, and you get kind of grinchy and scroogey until Thanksgiving, and then you're like, okay, we can celebrate Christmas now. So it's there's two extremes. And so today I think we should look at some middle ground and see if we can find somewhere where we can all kind of agree. Joel, this one's for you. All right. I took a poll on Instagram with the question, is celebrating Christmas in November acceptable? And the results of the poll are in. 48% of the people said yes, you can celebrate Christmas in December. 48%. 52% said no. 52% said no, which is pretty close. It's almost 50-50. And so the question still stands, can you celebrate Christmas in November? And as I said earlier, people get really passionate about this topic. For some reason, I had some people who were like, you got to be kidding me. You can't celebrate Christmas in November. What's wrong with you? And then other people are like, yeah, I've been celebrating since Halloween. And so there's people get really, really passionate about this. And so I've been thinking a lot about it. And I've come up with a solution that we can all agree upon, that we can all find common ground on, and we can do this every single year. This can be the new tradition that we do every single year. All right? What I've decided will work in my head, and this makes sense, and this is how we're going to do it from now on. We're going to celebrate Christmas-LITE in November. Christmas-LITE is it's like Christmas celebrations, but low key. It's not quite so crazy about it, right? And so during Christmas-LITE, which, by the way, lasts from Halloween, the end of Halloween, I guess the day after Halloween, until Thanksgiving. That's the time for Christmas-LITE. It's the time before Thanksgiving. And so during Christmas-LITE, you can do some Christmas stuff, but not all of it. All right? If you want to listen to some Christmas music, that's okay. They start playing Christmas music the day after Halloween, and if that's what you want to do during Christmas-LITE, that's acceptable. You can listen to all the Christmas music you want. I would advise not to listen to too much, though, or you'll get burnt out before Christmas, and then that's no good. So Christmas tunes are okay during Christmas-LITE. If you want to watch a Christmas movie, that's okay too, to an extent. All right, here's the catch with the Christmas movies. You have to save the good ones for after Thanksgiving. You can't just watch all the good Christmas movies before Christmas, and then you can't watch anything once Christmas time actually hits. So Christmas-LITE, during Christmas-LITE, you can't watch Christmas Story. That's off limits. You can't watch it. Not on Christmas-LITE. All right? Christmas Vacation, you can't watch it. It's just not acceptable. You can't be watching that before Christmas. You can only, before Thanksgiving. You can only watch that during actual Christmas time, right? And Santa Claus 1 and 2 are Christmas time movies. Santa Claus 3, though, Christmas-LITE. You can watch that if you want. And then Elf is up for debate. I don't know what to do with Elf. Comment your thoughts, because I could go either way with it. It's a good movie, but not that good, you know? If you want to put up some lightweight Christmas decorations before Thanksgiving, go for it, you know? If you want to put out the Christmas towels, go for it. If you want some Christmas soaps or something like that, that's acceptable as well on Christmas-LITE. But don't go too crazy with it. Don't be putting up, lights on your house before Thanksgiving, or don't go too crazy with it, because this is Christmas-LITE. Relax, all right? Also, if you want a Christmas drink, Joel, little Christmas Starbucks action, I guess you can have your Starbucks, Joel, your Christmas Starbucks. Have at it, buddy. All right. Things that are off limits during Christmas light, though. All right, here's some things that are off limits. One, going Christmas caroling. That's off limits during Christmas light. That's not acceptable. I don't know anybody who really goes Christmas caroling anyways, but if you do, you can't do it at Christmas light. You have to wait till after Thanksgiving. You're welcome. Two, baking cookies. I love cookies. I'm a cookie guy. They're great. Chocolate chip, homemade chocolate chip cookies, especially when they're made by mom, they're unbeatable, all right? But you can't do that during Christmas time. During Christmas light, sorry. You have to do that after Thanksgiving. Once Thanksgiving's done, Christmas cookies are a go, all right? Opening gifts. That would be awkward anyways. Here's a gift. What's the gift for? Thanksgiving? This isn't a gift-giving holiday. I didn't buy you anything. This is just awkward now. You can't be given gifts during Christmas light. It's off limits, all right? Four, saying Merry Christmas. You can't say that until after Thanksgiving, because then you're kind of forgetting about the good one. The one about the food, you're forgetting that. And so you can't say Merry Christmas during Christmas light. Maybe you could say Merry Christmas light. You could say that. You'd be like, Merry Christmas light, and people would be like, I don't know what that means. And then they could look it up and be blessed with the good news of Christmas light. All right? And lastly, being jolly is unacceptable during Christmas light. I don't know anybody who's ever been jolly. What does that even mean, jolly? I'm jolly. That's weird. That's strange. You're a little too happy. You're a little too happy. I think you need to dial that down a little bit, because your happiness is affecting my sanity. So being jolly is off limits during Christmas light, potentially on Christmas time. I don't even know. And that's Christmas light. Like I said, it's a low-key Christmas celebration. You can do it before Thanksgiving, but it only goes so far. You can't do all of it, and that's a necessary thing. Because if you go too far, then you're going to get burnt out by Christmas time. Because you can only do deck the halls and all these Christmas stuff so much before you get burnt out. Alright, so I would now like to switch gears and talk about our main topic. The goal of Riverside is to spread the gospel, to talk about Jesus and the Bible, and to teach Jesus, to teach the Bible, to do that. That's the goal of Riverside. The fly fishing stuff, the political, cultural stuff is kind of second in line to that. And so today I want to talk about Noah's Ark. We've been looking at Genesis lately. We started off with Genesis 1, 2, and 3, which is the creation of man and the world and the universe and the fall of man. The next week we talked about Cain and Abel. That was last video, episode 5. And so this week now we arrive at Genesis 6, which is Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is one of those stories that there's some misconceptions about it. There's some things Christians teach that isn't necessarily in the Bible. And then there's also some things that we just kind of read into it. And so I think the issue partially is that we're taught this story at a young age. And when we're taught this story, it's not dumbed down, but it's made in kid version. Everything's all happy and, cheery and all this stuff, and that's just not the case of the story. The story's not like that. I don't know if we help our children by doing that either. I struggle with that. Should we really make things in kid version completely without keeping the details of the story? Because what happens is people get this kid version of the story, and then when they get older, they're kind of shocked of how could this? One, I didn't realize that this was in the story. What else don't I know about the Bible? But two, this is kind of shocking. When you think of the story of Noah's Ark, it really is shocking. As a matter of fact, there's a podcast called Holy Ghost Stories. I don't know who does it. I'll maybe link in the description, but essentially, this man looks at the Bible, he writes artistic narratives of the different stories, and then he reads it and puts music and sound effects behind it. And he has one on Noah's Ark. And the reason I like it is because it shows the dark side of it. It shows a little bit of the perspective of the people who are not on the ark. And all of a sudden, imagine being in this story, and all of a sudden, the water starts to rise, like it starts to rain, and then water starts to rise, and before you know it, it's at your ankles. And then not long after that, it's at your knees, and it's at your waist. Maybe you try to find shelter or like a high place, so maybe you climb a tree. Eventually the water continues to rise. Or maybe you're like up on a mountain, and you see your entire civilization or your entire world around you just get sunken underwater. And as it rises and rises, you realize there's no hope for me either, because you can't swim forever. And so imagine being in that position. This is a dark story. And the reason we're bringing this up is I want to answer a question. And that question is, how could a loving God send a flood to wipe out the entire humanity of Earth? That's the question for today. This is a question that a lot of people struggle with. This is a question that shakes a lot of people's faith. This is a question that makes people question who God is, and makes them question if they even want to follow him. And so that's what we're going to discuss today. How could a loving God send a flood to wipe out the entirety of humanity? Like, how could that happen? And so we're going to look at the story today. I'm going to read portions of it, and we're going to talk about it. Chapter 6, verse 1 actually starts off in a really interesting way. It says, when mankind began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, I use air quotes for that, the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took any they chose as wives for themselves. And the Lord said, my spirit will not remain with mankind forever, because they are corrupt. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim, Nephilim, the Nephilim were on the earth both in those days and afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of mankind, who bore children to them. They were the powerful men of old, the famous men. And so that's how the whole story starts. It's talking about the sons of God having babies with the daughters of mankind, and then they produce Nephilim, and it's this whole question about what even is that? What is the Nephilim? Like, what were they like? What were some characteristics? They're traditionally known as giants. That's one thing that's generally known by them. They're talked about later in it's either Exodus or Numbers, I think, as being giants and all this stuff. And so there's a lot of mystery behind them. Nobody really knows exactly who they are or what they are, like what they looked like or any of that stuff. People speculate. People take educated guesses. I don't really know. I'm going to try to remember to put a video in the description down below that I found to be quite helpful about Nephilim and the sons of God. But yeah, that's a pretty mysterious thing. Who are the Nephilim? And then who are the sons of God? There's a few different interpretations of that. Are the sons of God men from the line of Seth? That's one different interpretation. And then people from the line of Seth were having daughters with the line of Cain, and it caused issues. Or another interpretation is that sons of God is angels, and they were having sex with the daughters of mankind or human women and having babies, and that's how they became giants. They had giant babies and Nephilim and all this stuff. There's different interpretations. I don't really know what to think of it. I don't think it really matters for this specific discussion. There's a time and place where it does matter. I get that. I'm not trying to avoid the discussion. If you'd like, I can do another discussion on this. But for all intents and purposes, at this point, I don't want to get too far into it. There's a link in the description below. If you're interested in that stuff, maybe check it out and research the Nephilim and the sons of God and how all that stuff works and what that even is. But that's how it starts. And then you get to verse 5. It says, when the Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was deeply grieved. I think that's an important key. That human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. Every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. This is an evil that we haven't seen on earth, at least from humans. And that's pretty crazy to say, because we've seen some crazy stuff in our world, right? There's awful stuff that happens, but this is, I think, even worse, Because even in today's day and age, there's still people who want to do good. There's still people who try to do the right thing. There are still godly people. And I don't think we've seen a world where every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. I don't think we've seen that personally. But that's a key. That's an important detail for this story. That every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and he was deeply grieved. Then the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I created off the face of the earth, together with all the animals, creatures that crawl, the birds of the sky, for I regret that I made them. Noah, however, found favor with the Lord. So there's this guy, Noah, who somehow found favor with the Lord. It's believed, if you look at it, he's righteous. Like, that's why he found favor with the Lord. He followed God, he loved God, etc., etc. Then it gets into the family records of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. See, right there. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his contemporaries. Noah walked with God. And Noah fathered 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now you'll find out later in the story that Shem, Ham, and Japheth, all 3 of them have wives, and Noah has a wife. And so once God tells Noah to make the ark, and he does, and he tells him to get inside the ark, Noah, his wife, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and their wives all get on the ark. So there's 8 people on the ark. Okay. Verse 11. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with wickedness. God saw how corrupt the earth was, for every creature had corrupted its way on the earth. Then God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to every creature, for the earth is filled with wickedness because of them. Therefore I'm going to destroy them along with the earth. Then he gives the specifications of Noah's ark. He tells him how to make it. He wants him to make it of gopher wood, make rooms in the ark, cover it with pitch inside and out. Tells him it's supposed to be 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet high. You're to make a roof finishing the sides of the ark within 18 inches of the roof. Put a door in the side of the ark. So he tells him how to make it. And then you get to verse 17. Understand that I am bringing a flood waters on the earth to destroy every creature under heaven with the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish, but I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark with your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives. You are also to bring into the ark 2 of all the living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of everything, from the birds according to their kinds, from the livestock according to their kinds, and from the animals that crawl on the ground according to their kinds, will come to you so that you can keep them alive. Take with you every kind of food that is eaten, gather it as food for you and for them. And Noah did this. He did everything that God had commanded him. So basically, God commands him, make an ark, and then you're going to put all these animals on it. 2 of each kind, etc., etc. You've seen the kiddie books with the 2 lions walking together, and then the 2 bunny rabbits, and then the 2, beavers, whatever it is. Chapter 7, verse 1 starts the portion where they enter the ark. And the Lord said to Noah, enter the ark, you and all your household, for I have seen that you alone are righteous before me in this generation. You are to take with you 7 pairs, a male and its female, and of all the clean animals, and 2 of the animals that are not clean, a male and its female, and 7 pairs, male and female, of the birds of the sky, in order to keep the offspring alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I'll make it rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will wipe off the face of the earth. And Noah did everything that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old. He's an old man. He's an old fogey. So Noah was 600 years old when the flood came and water covered the earth. So Noah, his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives entered the ark because of the flood waters. From the clean animals, unclean animals, birds, and every creature that crawls on the ground, 2 of each, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark just as God commanded them. 7 days later, the flood waters came on the earth. So this is the portion where they enter the ark. After that, you get to the flood. Essentially, the flood waters rose. Like I said earlier, imagine seeing this. Imagine being in the ark. Imagine being in Noah's shoes, where you and your family are the only people on the ark, and you watch as flood waters rise, and you know as you look out over this water that there are people under there who have died. Their homes, their livestock, their wealth, their animals, everything is gone. And as the water rises and rises and rises and rises, it even gets to covering the mountains 20 feet. It's 20 feet higher than all the mountains. I know people who say this is too far-fetched. This story is almost absurd. Like, this didn't happen. There's no way. And it is kind of crazy to think about, right? It's a crazy story. But my question is, well, if you believe in a God who created everything, spoke everything into existence, then a story like this really isn't that absurd. It's just not. I mean, if you really believe in a God who is that powerful, this is not anything. I mean, this is just something that he can do, right? So I don't think this is really that absurd. It says in verse 17, chapter 7, the flood continued for 40 days on the earth. The water increased and lifted the ark up so that it rose above the earth. The water surged and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water, just like boats do. Then the water surged even higher on the earth, and all the high mountains under the whole sky were covered. The mountains were covered as the water surged above them more than 20 feet. Every creature perished, those that crawl on the earth, and it kind of lists all the animals, everything with the breath of the spirit of life in its nostrils, everything on dry land died. He wiped out every living thing that was on the face of the earth, from mankind to livestock, to creatures that crawled, to the birds of the sky, and they were wiped off the earth. Only Noah was left, and those that were with him in the ark. And the water surged on the earth for 150 days. Chapter 8 starts where the flood recedes. The water starts to go down. He sends out two birds, essentially. One is a raven. Sends out a raven to find land. Raven doesn't find land. Then he sends out a dove to find land. Dove doesn't find land. Then he sends it out again. And the second time the dove does find land. The water recedes enough to where the boat lands in the mountain range of Ararat. Mountains of Ararat. And then eventually, once the water recedes enough, the doors of the ark open, all the animals are released. And yeah, that's the story of Noah's Ark. And starting in chapter 8, verse 15, you see the Lord's promise. And then in verse 1 of chapter 9, you see God's covenant with Noah. And then at the end of chapter 9 is prophecies about Noah's family. Now, the question we're going to answer today, and I think it was important to read that because just to kind of get the details right, but the question we're going to answer today is, how could a loving God send a flood to wipe out the entirety of all humanity on the earth? That's the question we're answering today. As I said before, this is a question that trips a lot of people up. It's a question that, for some, is faith-shaking, and I'm here to show you that it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be faith-shaking at all, and the reason that I believe that is this. In order to understand this, you have to understand who God is. I think sometimes we have the inclination to humanize God. And how could we not? Right? It's easy to do because we've never seen anything like him. Even the things that man has made and put in God's position in our minds and our hearts, man-made gods, even they're humanized. Even they act off of emotion. Even they make wrong decisions and this and that. So how could we not try and humanize this? But we have to remember who God is. God isn't human. He's better than us. He's completely beyond our comprehension. God is omnipotent, which means all-powerful. He's also omniscient, which means all-knowing. Okay? God is all-powerful, all-knowing. If God is all-knowing, this means that God understands justice, he understands punishment, he understands what death means and all that stuff much better than we ever could here on earth. He also understands what happens after we die in this life. So he understands all of that much, much better than we ever could here on earth. Then that's an important thing to remember and to think about. You know, if God truly is omniscient, if he really is all-knowing, then is it possible then for him to understand the state of our hearts? If he really does know everything, then is it possible for him to know the state of our hearts? And then, at that point, is it possible for him to know the state of our hearts throughout all time? Is it possible for him to know the state of our hearts throughout all of time? The answer to that is yes. If the answer to that's no, then we need to go back to the first question about who God is, and we need to look at that again. I think sometimes people have trouble trusting that God is who he says he is. And I get it. I get that. But the Bible says he's omniscient, he's all-knowing, and so we can trust that. So if he's omniscient, he can understand our hearts, and he knows our hearts, but he also knows our hearts throughout all time. And if the answer to that is, if that's true, then God can make a judgment based on our hearts throughout all time. God knows whether or not these people in Genesis 6 are going to turn their back to God and never have a relationship, always hate him, always despise him, etc., or if they will eventually turn their lives around and follow him. God has the ability to know that. The question is, were they doing that? Is it possible that these people were that corrupt, that wicked? That's why I made the point earlier. Chapter 6, verse 5, when the Lord saw that human wickedness was widespread on the earth, and that every inclination of the human mind was nothing but evil all the time, the Lord regretted that he made man on earth, and he was deeply grieved. So that's the state of mankind at this point. And I think that's important to note. I think it's important to remember, because it shows the state of mankind at this time. I think God's judgment was righteous here, in other words. I don't think he was just I don't like mankind anymore, I'm just going to wipe him off. I think he's making a true judgment, a well thought out, he made a judgment that he really thought about, and it's not just a flippant thing. He's really thinking about it, and it probably isn't something that he wants. It probably doesn't make him happy that he has to do this, but he does. And so humanity is corrupt, wicked to the point that we've never ever seen. And yeah, so like I said, if we have a God who's omniscient, who's all-knowing, and he knows the hearts of all humanity throughout all time, then he can make a judgment based on that. And we should trust that it's a righteous judgment, it's a good judgment, and that he knows what he's doing. Sometimes we like to think we know justice better than God does. Sometimes we like to think we know justice and love and mercy, all this stuff, better than he does. We have to humble ourselves, and remember that that's just not the case. That's just not the case. We can't believe that we know justice and mercy and all this stuff better than he does, because we don't. We just don't. We just don't. And if we did, then why would we ever follow God? Like, if we did, then God's not God, right? And so that's something we have to remember. Another point that we have to remember when we're thinking about this question is this. I don't think we understand the weight of our sin. I was talking to a good friend, Josh, about this, and one point he brought up is that we asked this question of, why would a loving God send the flood? We asked this question from a point of, I don't deserve that. I don't deserve to be wiped out in a flood. The people around me don't deserve to be wiped out in a flood. But the simple fact of the matter is, yes, we do deserve that. At the end of the day, we do deserve that. We do deserve judgment. We do deserve to be punished. We do deserve, that's because of sin. We all have sin in our lives. We've all done wrong things, egregious things. Thank God for mercy. Thank God for grace. Thank God for the cross and for the resurrection, because without that, the flood is what we'd all get. The only reason we're not wiped out is because God showed mercy and grace. That's the only reason. And so that's a good point to remember too. I don't think we understand the weight of our sin. I don't think we understand that flood right there is what we deserve too. And it's through grace that God saves us. It's through grace that God saved Noah in this story. And that he allowed the Israelites to continue on through him. If he was wiped out, then the Israelites would have never happened. We would have never happened. Jesus would have never happened. None of that would have ever happened. It's through grace that God saved humanity, even just through one person. Lastly, I think we have to understand that God is perfectly holy. God is perfectly holy, and since he's perfectly holy, this means that God can't allow evil on his watch. If he did allow evil, he would cease to be holy, essentially. The way I can explain that best is this. I was a cop, so my brain works in a law enforcement way, right? And so, for example, if a cop is on patrol, right, and somebody comes up next to his car, murders somebody right in front of this cop, just cold-blooded, just shoots him right in the heart, and then walks away, and the cop watches it, shrugs, and just goes, yeah, whatever, no big deal. Is that a good cop? Is that a good cop? No, if that was the case, he'd be in prison, probably. He'd probably be in jail for just letting it happen. But two, that's not a good thing. That's not a good cop. That's not justice, just letting things happen. And so the same thing is for God, too. If God was to just sit here and let all this sin happen and let all this evil and chaos just reign in the world completely unchecked, and he didn't do anything about it, I would say that's not a good God. But the simple fact of the matter is that he did deal with sin, and he did it in the most loving way possible. He did it in the most loving way possible. Because he actually showed mercy and grace to humanity. He gave us a way out. He sent his own son on earth to die in our place. That punishment is what we deserve. That's what I deserve. And so he dealt with sin in the most loving way possible. It's either we have to deal with our sin and pay the price for our sin, or Jesus does it for us. And God is loving and merciful and graceful enough to send his son in our place. So because God is holy, means he can't allow evil to just go unchecked. And so he had to deal with it. And that's what we see in Genesis 6 in the account of the flood, is that God saw that evil existed, not and evil beyond anything we've seen. Let's keep that in mind. But he saw evil in the world, and he had to deal with it. Sin has to be dealt with, and so he did. In his omniscience, being a perfect judge, he made a perfect judgment in the flood story. Okay. And this is where we'll wrap up with this segment. This is something I think we all have to remember. We all have to remember that, and this is something I've especially harped on since 2020 and the riots and the George Floyd, the BLM, the Breonna Taylor stuff, and no matter which side of the aisle you're on, no matter whether you're on this side or that side, we can all find peace, understanding that God is the perfect judge. He is the perfect judge. And what I mean by that is this: God is a perfect investigator. God knew exactly what happened in any of those instances. He knew exactly what they were thinking. He knew the motives of these people. He knew the hearts of these people. He knows exactly what happened. God is the perfect investigator. We can rest at peace and rest peacefully, understanding that God knows what happened more than we ever could, more than any investigation could ever reveal. And based on that knowledge, he's able to make a perfect judgment and deal with the wrongdoing how he sees fit. And if somebody's done wrong, they have two options. They can either pay for what they did, or they can trust Jesus and put their faith in him, and then Jesus will deal with that for them. And you might be saying, well, that's not fair because he did wrong. Yes, but what have you done wrong? What have I done wrong? The second that I have to say, well, God shouldn't show him grace or show him mercy, is the second I have to say that about myself. And so we should all be, no matter which side of that aisle that you're on, this kind of a side rabbit hole, right? But no matter what side of the aisle you're on in those situations, we can rest assured knowing that God is the perfect investigator, he's the perfect judge, and he's the perfect sentencer. And that's that. That brings me peace, and that brings me comfort in this issue, understanding that he's all those things. So in the Genesis 6 story, how could a loving God send a flood on everybody and wipe out the entirety of humanity? In his omniscience, God made a perfect judgment about all of humanity. He knows their hearts. He knows their hearts throughout time, and he made a perfect judgment on humanity. Not only that, he showed mercy by giving humanity a way out through saving Noah and his family. And from Noah's bloodline, he was able to repopulate the world and give us another chance. And essentially, through him, you get the story of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and from there you get the Israelites. And from there, you get Jesus. And so that's kind of how I wrap this up in my head. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your comments on this subject. I feel like we could talk about this forever. I feel like we could just spend hours on this. But that's kind of how I answer that question of how could a loving God send a flood to wipe out the entirety of humanity. Again, I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, because I don't want to just talk at you. I want to build a community of people who bounce ideas off each other and who think through these things and who really work to build each other up. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another, and that's that. That wraps up this segment. Next, we're going to talk about getting started in fly fishing on a budget. Alright, so the last segment of the day, this one's for my fly fishing friends or for people who are kind of interested in the sport. Where I come from, I'm from Kentucky, and fly fishing really isn't common. I don't live in Colorado, I don't live in Montana. Where I'm come from, fly fishing is extremely niche. It's kind of niche anyways in the fishing community as a whole, but then you get to where I'm from, and fly fishing is like almost unheard of. Like, people see you fly fishing out in public, and they're like, this is weird. Like, what are you doing? So it's kind of niche anyways. But probably the most common question that I've gotten from friends and people who are interested in fly fishing where I'm from is, how do you get started in fly fishing without spending a ton of money? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I brought some stuff that I've kind of accumulated through the years and acquired through the years, and I'm going to show you today what I got. I didn't spend much money in order to get started. As a matter of fact, I got started pretty frugally. I was pretty frugal with my purchases, and so I'll show you kind of what I got. This is the rod that I've got. It's called a Wild Water rod. It was about $100 on Amazon. It comes with the rod right here, the reel. This orange line in here is called backing. This blue line is called fly line. This clear line right here is called leader. So it comes with all that. It comes with a carrying case. It comes with 9 or 12 flies, like little bitty flies. They're designed for trout, but you can catch bluegill on them. You can even catch some small bass on them if you're really lucky. You can catch, but yeah, so it comes with all that. It came with a pair of nippers, which is essentially fingernail cut clippers, but you can cut like fly line with them. That's what they're designed for. And so that's what it came with. And that was $100 on Amazon. So it's nothing fancy. It's not like the top-notch, top-tier fly rod and reel and all that stuff, but it's enough to get you started. I've had that rod for 2 years, and I've had zero issues with it. So it's $100 on Amazon. Comes with pretty much everything you need to get started. But with that said, you're going to want to buy a few other things. For example, this was my next purchase after I bought my rod and reel, was a net. This is my net. This is it was $30 on Amazon, I think. It has rubber netting. This is helpful so that your fly or your hook doesn't get caught in the netting, which would cause issues next time you catch a fish. They'd get stabbed and poked and all that stuff. So this is helpful. Like I said, $30 on Amazon. We're sitting at $130 right now, which really isn't much in order to get started. I put all this stuff, all my fly fishing gear, in an old backpack that I have. I used to use it for the sheriff's office that I used to work for. So I put it all in there, and you don't need to spend a bunch of money. You're also going to need some flies, though. The kit that I bought, that Wild Water kit, came with like 9 trout flies. And where I'm from, trout just really aren't that common. You can go to a few places and catch trout, but really the main thing here is sunfish, bass, smallmouth, largemouth bass are huge here. I mean, like, popular here. They're not like necessarily like Texas-sized bass, but that's kind of the main thing. So if you're from where I'm from, you're going to want to buy some new flies. This is my fly collection. The ones on the top here are the ones that came with the Wild Water kit. I bought a lot of these. My wife got some for me for Christmas, and she found some at like a bargain store in town. These are called Pistol Petes. I don't know if you can see them, but they have like a little propeller on them. This catches fish. I don't know if people use Pistol Petes much, but I do. I catch a lot of fish on Pistol Petes. Have some bumblebee representation or imitations here. A lot of Pistol Petes. So that's all my trout flies. And then this is the fun stuff. These are woolly buggers, which is a good fly for like bass and trout, stuff like that. But then I got these off of Blue Line Fly Company. These are all bass flies, so they're really cool. Blue Line Fly Company is a company online. They make a lot of content with Wild Water Productions on YouTube. And so if you're getting into fly fishing, check them out. They make like solid content. They're pretty much making the best content in the game. They go to Colorado. They just went to Alaska. They went down to Florida, somewhere down like tropical, all over the place, just to fly fish. They make really good content. I got a few poppers. These are poppers. These are really good. These are top water flies. So if you're into top water fishing, get some of those. And yeah, this is probably my favorite one. This is like I don't even know what these are called. I wish they labeled these better whenever they came in the mail. But this actually has 2 hooks, right? You can kind of see the 2 hooks. I don't know. But it looks really good when it swims in the water. This is a crawdad imitation. You can kind of see the 2 hooks, or like the 2 claws that they have. It's a crawdad imitation. I like it a lot. And then I recently caught, let's see, a decent sized smallmouth on this one. I don't know if you can see this. Like, maybe like, is that better? Yeah. There you go. I recently caught a pretty good smallmouth on that. I'll show you this one with the 2 hooks now that you can see it better. Oops. Maybe. So you can kind of see the 2 hooks that it has. This one's really cool. It's got some flash in it. And then I'll show you the top water. Like I said, these flies, flies aren't super cheap, but they're not super expensive either. So, you're going to spend a little bit of money on it, but at the end of the day, it's you're really not spending much. At the end of the day, I guess the total amount that I've probably spent on fly fishing gear, let's see, the rod was $100, the net was about $30, the flies I probably spent $30, $40 on that stuff. So you're looking at maybe $200 to get started fly fishing. It's really not much. It's really not much. $200 in my opinion is a lot of money, but over time, if you're getting stuff kind of here and there, it really isn't bad. What people run into issues with is when they feel the need to go buy everything all at once and buy like the name brand, like the fancy stuff. You don't need to do it. You just don't need to do that. So like I said, that's how I got started, and the general idea is to kind of just get started. Just spend a little bit of money to get started, and then as you go, upgrade some stuff. If you eventually need a new reel or a rod, which I eventually will, go buy a new reel or rod. Spend a little money, get you something nicer than just this basic Amazon purchase, and get yourself a new reel or rod. If you need new flies, go buy new flies. If you need new fly line or leader, go buy it. But you don't have to buy this all at one time. Just get started, see if you like it, and then as you go, upgrade until you have the stuff that you think you really need. Waders, I don't even do that. For waders, I use the waders from the baptistry at the church. So you find ways to make this affordable, right? And that's really what I'm trying to prove today. Is you don't have to spend a ton of money. There's this common misconception that you have to spend a bunch of money and then it's really hard, and it's neither of those. You don't have to spend a bunch of money, and it's really it's really not that hard to fly fish. Buy yourself a rod, try casting, practice a little bit in your backyard or wherever you can, and then go to the river, practice casting there, and you might catch a fish, and then as you go, you'll get better and better and better. It's really not hard. And so that's how to start fly fishing on a budget. If you're interested in fly fishing, that's a great way to start. And that's today's show, by the way. It's all we got. So stay tuned. Next week we will have, we'll discuss something else. I'm not really sure what we're doing next week, but stay tuned. It'll be good. And yeah, have a good one. Bye.